So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Udayan Bhattacharya from Arindak. I welcome you all to today's webinar. We are starting the Eco Talk after a while. Today we'll be keeping all of the participants muted, and whenever you have questions, you can put that to the chat room. Both the speaker of the day, Alolika Sinha, and myself, the host of the meeting, will be able to see them. And at the end of the meeting, Alolika will be addressing some of these questions as much as time permits. So Alolika is expected to complete the talk within about 25 minutes. So I'll be giving her a reminder at 20 minutes, and afterwards she will take some questions. Now, I'd like to request Alolika to start her talk. She will be talking about grassland and its obligate fauna, and how grassland has been a neglected ecosystem. And she'll also be talking about her own work related to grassland and its fauna. So I hand this over to Alolika now.
Thank you, Udanda. I'm audible, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Udanda, for the introduction to the topic and to myself. And very good afternoon to all my viewers. Thank you indeed for joining us today. I hope you all are keeping safe during this time of pandemic. So without further delay, as we have a time constraint, I would straight away start with my presentation. I will be broadly speaking about grasslands and its dependent fauna and how these grasslands has been neglected for a long time now. I will be drawing examples from Manas National Park because that's where I have that's the place where I have studied. I did my research work. So to begin with, what necessarily is a grassland? A grassland is any such habitat dominated by grass species or grass-like species. As you can see from the pictures here, these are two photos from Manas of grassland habitat and mostly dominated by grass species. So earlier work during 1973, these authors have classified grasslands of India into five broad categories on the species composition, but subsequent works have further classified the grasslands of India into finer scale and into more categories. So of all these categories, what we have in northeast part of India and Assam is the sub-Himalayan tall grasslands of the Tarai region. I'll come what a Tarai region is. So this type of grasslands are dominated by the species that I have mentioned here, the saccharum and the imperata. The saccharum, the most very famous in Assamese, it's called kohua or the kans in Hindi. So these are the species that dominate our grasslands. And these two pictures necessarily speak of this sub-Himalayan tall grasslands of Tarai. Now, coming to the Tarai region, as you can see here, the greenish yellow mark. So this is the Tarai region. It extends from northern part of India in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, all the way to Assam, and it shares its boundary with Nepal and Bhutan. So this is the Tarai region is characterized by tall grasslands, clayey soil, and a heavy rainfall. And due to all these factors, this region is very productive, and also these grasslands are among the tallest in the world and supports many iconic and charismatic species which are also threatened, like the one-horned rhinoceros, hawk deer, Bengal florican, pygmy hawk, to name a few. So now coming to the title of my today's presentation, it's grassland and its obligate fauna, a forgotten ecosystem. I have deliberately put a forgotten ecosystem, the phrase, because I really feel and I really advocate for that grasslands are one of the most neglected, given the rate of conversion and all. I will coming in my subsequent slides on this. So to give you an overview of grasslands, as I mentioned that grasslands are of immense ecological and economic significance. Ecological because they are vital habitats to Asia's most threatened wildlife like the rhinos, hawk deer, Bengal florican. Also the great Indian bustards, lesser florican, though we don't have those in this part of the country. And it is economically significant because it does play a very significant role on the pastoral communities of our country. But as mentioned, that despite of its importance, this ecosystem has not get much of attention. Uh, and like mostly the importance of the grasslands are known to the what we call the informed people or the conservationists who have worked there. As I mentioned that I will be drawing examples from Manas National Park as I have primarily worked there. So coming to the grasslands of Manas, the grasslands of Manas are very rich. We have some 43 species of grasses in 7 associations. Associations are the heterogeneous community of the grasslands that occur together. In the pictures below, you can see in this green picture, this little white thing are the flowering imperator flower imperator grasses, and back there the tall grasslands are of Naringa. So these grasslands occur in a heterogeneous composition, what we call as the grass association. And of the 519 square kilometer of the Manas National Park, I have this 519 square kilometer includes only the main 3 ranges and not the first edition that has been added in 2017, I guess. So of this 519 square kilometer, around 40% of the habitat is occupied by grasslands, which supports some 21 threatened species. But these grasslands are again degrading slowly because of the invasion and other anthropogenic activities. Now I come to why did I chose Manas and its grassland as a part of my study. First, when I visited Manas some 10 years back as a master's student, I just simply fell in love with the place. That was the first reason that I chose to study Manas. I conduct my research work in Manas. And then coming to the ecological thing, I mentioned about the Tarai. So the Tarai is basically divided into the Western Tarai and the Eastern Tarai. The Western Tarai is where the Corbett National Park and all the protected areas of northern India lies, and whereas the Manas lies in the Eastern Tarai. And in the Eastern Tarai, Manas has the potential prime grassland habitats that supports many threatened species, many rare species. Given this, as you might know, that Manas has also suffered from the armed conflict for almost 2 decades, which rendered the habitat degraded and declining wildlife population. But with the restoration of governance in 2003 with the formation of the Borland Territorial Council, conservation attention was given, but mostly to the charismatic mammals like repopulating the park with the one-horned rhinoceros or the tiger. Uh, with the conservation intervention to secure the population of those charismatic species, the grassland habitat and its other dependent fauna like the hog deer or the hispid hare still remains overlooked and is paid less attention. So I choose to study the interaction of hog deer and the grassland habitat to come up with a concrete conservation issues that can be addressed. I won't delve into much into my study area, as I mentioned that I will be citing example from Manas. Just I wanted you to know that you see the green portion here, right? The dark green portion are the woodlands, and that this lighter green portion are the grasslands. And within this lighter green portion, there are tiny dots of a little darker dots. These are the alluvial grasslands. In Manas, we have basically 2 kinds of grasslands. Savanna grasslands, which are vast swathes of grass dominated by Naringa or species like that and dotted with tree species like Bombyx, Zillenia. Whereas the alluvial grasslands are the grasslands that grow on the wetter parts of the on a wetter soil with tall grass species like Phagmite, Ondodonas, etc. So to begin with, what I first did is I first wanted to know what is the status of the grasslands in Manas, and secondly, I wanted to know, as a model, I selected hog deer as one of the species, and I wanted to know how the hog deers were doing in Manas. I'll explain why. So for grasslands, what we did, we used a combination of the GIS and remote sensing technology, and also undertook some ground surveys to understand like what is the condition, what is the status of the grassland habitat over the years, whether they are increasing, whether decreasing, what is the trend. So for that, we have analyzed land use, land cover. We have developed land use, land cover maps by analyzing the satellite imageries of from 1988 to 2019. We have 5 satellite imageries to understand the change in the grassland cover. Similarly, and after consequently, we also did on-ground survey to understand like what is the to identify the areas which are degraded or the potential patches for wildlife. And also we did an experiment on understanding the grassland productivity. In today's presentation, I have kept it very non-technical, so I won't be delving into the grassland productivity experiment. I will be mainly focusing on these two. From this graph, as you can see, I mentioned about the time scale. So we analyzed satellite imageries of 1988, 95, 2003, 11, and 2019. You can see over the years, this is the savanna grassland, this is the alluvial grassland. Over the years, the grassland continued to decline. The grassland cover, which was around 60% in 1988, declined to less than 40% in 2019. Similarly, the woodland cover, the forested area, the woodland increased over the years. If I put this in a map, so this is the map from 1988 and 2019. Within a span of 30 years, you can see that most of the grassland is gone. See, the grasslands are gone. It's a huge decline. So when I plot this data into a regression to calculate like what will be the rate of loss of grasslands by 2025, I found that around 2% of the alluvial grassland, of the existing alluvial grassland, and around 5% of the existing savanna grassland will be gone by 2025 if we don't arrest the anthropogenic activities or the pressure that leads to this destruction now. Now coming to the survey part, what we did is we took a survey on understanding the spread of alien invasive plants in the grasslands of Manas. So alien invasive plants are plants that are not native to this ecosystem and this part of the country, but they have like proliferated like anything and causing harm to the native flora and also of course fauna. So what we have found is like from the survey that around 30% of the grassland habitats that we have in Manas is invaded, and the road networks or the other openings have facilitated the spread of these invasive plants. Given all this data, what we did using the modern technology of species distribution modeling, we predicted like what are the possible probabilities, like how vulnerable are the grassland habitats due to invasion. And you can see that these are the maps showing the invasion, the vulnerability of the grasslands invasion by Cromolina and by Mycenia. And you can see that almost entire grasslands will be affected by the invasion. So the take-home message from this part of my study is, number one, the grasslands of Manas has been drastically declining. And number two, the grasslands of Manas are very, very vulnerable to the invasion by Cromolina and Mycenia. Now coming to the species part of my study, I wanted, as I told, I wanted to know that how the hog deers are doing in Manas. So for that, what I did, I estimated the population abundance of the species in the park, and I identified the factors that might have an effect on a hog deer. And from this information, I wanted to draw the conclusion that what conservation intervention is actually needed to safeguard the species and the habitat. So for calculating, for recording the number of hog deer, I just went to field, and you can see from this map. So this line, these straight lines are transects. So transects, for those who do not know, transects are a standard protocol of estimating herbivore densities and has been widely used. So what we do is we walk. I say walk, but I actually didn't walk. We did the survey from elephant bag, because as the grasslands are dense and it is difficult when you walk through these grasslands, and as the hog deer is a small animal, there are fair chances that you miss out the animals. So it is better to conduct a survey in these denser habitats from a raised platform, and elephant back was a perfect way of doing it in this landscape. So what we did, we traversed across the grasslands in straight line to count the animals. In 2 years, I surveyed some 75 line transects with an effort of 206 kilometer from elephant back. And when I put this information into a software called Distance, which basically gives you an estimate of the animal population abundance. So what I found that the density of hog deer in Manas is around 18 per square kilometer, which gives me a population of approximately 3,600 animals. That is, Manas now harbors some 3,600 hog deer. If you see this map, this blue these are the areas which are where the most number of sightings of hog deer happened in Manas. And these are all the technical jargons. I'm not going in details in this. Now, to know what are the factors and how the hog deer are actually doing in Manas, what I tried further was I tried to estimate the habitat preferences. Hog deer being a complete grassland dependent species, I wanted to check, like, these are my different grassland types, the Imperator, Narenga, Phragmites, like which are the most preferred habitats of a hog deer within that major grassland habitat. And I found out that the grassland that hog deer prefer areas with Imperator and Imperator Narenga. So there is this statistical method of Manley standardized preference index, which gives you it's the index which tells you that when your value lies above 1, that particular habitat or resource is preferred by the animal, and your value lies below 1, that particular habitat or resources is not used. So from this index, I can tell that hog deer has a preference for a mosaic of tall and short grasslands. To further understand, like, what are the factors that actually affect the hog deer in Manas, I did something called generalized linear modeling. It's a statistical approach again, and I found out that these factors, like the abundance of the 2 invasive species like Cromona, Mycenia, human presence, and distance to human habitation, have a negative influence on hog deer habitat use, while the grasses like Imperator does have a positive impact. And again, I used my ground survey data in a modeling approach called Maxent to understand, like, and identify what are the most suitable areas for hog deer in Manas. And the area, you can see from the map that these are the areas that shows that these are the most suitable habitats for hog deer in Manas. Okay, now I thought how to bring in these 2 pieces of information. There's a declining trend of grasslands in Manas, and then the factors that may have an impact on hog deer. How to bring these 2 pieces of information together to derive something meaningful. And what I did for that was this. So these 2 maps, as you can see, this is a risk assessment map that tells us that what are the probabilities or which areas are vulnerable to invasion in Manas, and this is a map which shows the most suitable habitats of hog deer in Manas. As you can compare the map and see, the areas that are vulnerable to invasion are also the most important habitats for hog deer. So we have a problem here, right? As from the earlier slides, you can recall that the invasive species have a negative impact on hog deer habitat use. So that means if the entire grassland of Manas is invaded, there are fair chances that we don't have hog deer anymore. I take hog deer here as a model, but this may hold true for other grassland obligates like the pygmy hawk or the hispid deer or the Bengal florican. So in this scenario, in this present risk assessment map, we can easily predict that there are fair chances that the grassland habitat, that the grassland dependent species of species of animals have a fair chances of habitat shrinkage or losing their habitat, and that can be a huge threat for them. So what do we do now? As a people with an ecological background or who have studied ecology, will know that the grasslands are primarily regulated by the hydrological action. The floods are the architect of the grassland ecosystem, I would say. So, but in case of Manas, we don't have regular floods unlike Kaziranga. In Kaziranga, people who know about Kaziranga is one such landscape which experiences floods every time, and it replenishes the habitat, and thus we have this abundance of species of all the grassland dependent fauna. But in case of Manas, we don't have that regular flooding. And also, as you can see, the northern landscape is all the highlands of Bhutan. We have the Bhutan mountains here, and in the southern part we have this human habitation. So we have grasslands only in this chunk of land, which is not much, which is around some 500 square kilometer area, and we have maybe less than 200 square kilometer of grassland habitat available. The grassland habitats that are gone, it's very difficult for them like to bring them back. But whatever we have is this much. So what do we do now? There are these important and rare species like Bengal phorecan, hawk deer, swamp deer, the Asiatic buffalo, which needs pure grassland habitats to survive. And this grassland in Manas don't have a opportunity of expansion given the northern highlands and the human habitation in the southern boundary. The only way out to conserve these grasslands are active management. By active management, people how do I put it? Grasslands, as they are not the climax sterile stage, they need a human intervention to remain as a grasslands, and more so in this landscape. So what the management do, they have this annual fire for the grasslands. We have annual burning, where in the dry period the grasslands are burnt out, so that new flushes of grasslands come up and can be nutritious. I don't know what's happening. Sorry.
Anamika, I just want to remind you that it's 22 minutes completed,
Right.
so you can just plan accordingly. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Danda, for the reminder. Yeah. So coming to this, so we have this annual burning thing, but then burning is put it as a necessary evil. We do need burning to maintain the grasslands, but burning at the wrong time, at the wrong frequency, can be very deleterious to all the wildlife, especially the lesser one. So what we do is we have to be very cautiously burn these grasslands, living patches of unburned grasslands for the animal to take refuge, and do it in a patch-wise manner and all. Also at RNF, what we did is, I mentioned about the invasive species. So what we did an experiment, I didn't put up the results here, I just wanted to state that we did an experiment, and what we found out that manual uprooting of the invasive plants can help restore the degraded grasslands. On an experimental basis, what we did is, we had some 1 hectare area which was completely degraded with 90% of invasive plants present there. We manually uprooted, and followed by grass plantation at the right time, gave back our the patch of grassland within 3 years of time. But again, it's time consuming, and it's also expensive. Sometimes it's labor intensive. So yes, so the take home message that I want to give is, grasslands are of course neglected, and it's high time that we that think about the grasslands, and we pay attention to the grasslands, because it's not only the habitat but also the dependent fauna that should thrive. That should thrive. So yeah, I end my talk here. Udanda, if someone has question, I will be happy to answer. Thank you, and all these people really helped me in my study. I have kept my it's a part of my PhD. I have kept my talk very, very popular and non-technical, but people who want to know more about it can write to me. I have my email ID. Yeah. Over to you then.
Yeah, so we have few questions, First is from Jahnavi Bora. She's asking, what are the biological factors like temperature, etc., that affects the growth and condition of the grasslands?
Please come again. What is the
Yeah,
biological factors like temperature and
at temperature, etc. She says, what are the biological factors like temperature, etc., that affects the growth and condition of the grasslands?
talking about the condition, temperature does play an important role. Temperature, precipitation does have an important role in shaping up our grasslands. I haven't conducted any experiments, so I don't have the primary data to answer your question, but yeah, it does have an effect. Like I did an experiment with productivity, right? Uh, so the condition of the soil, I didn't put up the result of my grassland annual productivity here. So the temperature, the soil nutrient, all plays a very significant role in shaping the grassland.
So, second question is from Shankarsan Rastogi. What do you think would be the effect of swamp deer on habitat use patterns of hog deer? Also, you talked about planting native grass species, but is there any scientific data to distinguish between exotic and native grass species?
Mr. Rastogi, I'll talk this in context of Manas. In terms of swamp deer having an impact on hog deer habitat use, we don't have much swamp deer in Manas. As you might know, we have lost the original swamp deer population in Manas, and in subsequent years they had been reintroduced. So there are not more than some 60 to 80 swamp deer presently in Manas, and that might not, till now, that might not have any significant impact first. And secondly, you asked about what was the second part of his question?
Yeah, second part is yeah. I'm sorry.
Native about, I think, native
Yeah, yeah.
plantation.
So also you talked about planting native grass species, but is there any scientific data to distinguish between exotic and native grass species?
Right. So by native, what I meant was we have data from maybe 30 or 40 years back, like what species of grass actually exist in Manas. So what we did after removing the invasive, we planted the existing species of grass. I cite you an example. When I told this in a conference, we planted Imperator, and someone came up and told that Imperator is an invasive. But no, Imperator is not an invasive in case of Manas. It's native to Manas. So what we did is the local availability, like the sacrum species, the phragmites, depending on the soil type, we planted those kind of grass species. But again, it may vary from site to site. So it's advisable to have a complete previous knowledge of the area you are trying to restore to identify the species. Yes.
Okay. So next question is from Anna Chandra Nath from Assam University, Silchar. As groom the change detection, okay, I don't know completely, as groom the change detection map and deer distribution map, we understand that deer population are clustered in non-woodland areas. So how woodlands and human intervention in woodlands, if any, having impact on deer population distribution?
Right. So
Yeah.
hog deer is necessarily a grassland obligate species. If I go back to the right, just a second. Yeah. So hog deer is a species which is completely dependent on grasslands. And Manas, prior to this armed conflict, used to have some 10,000 of hog deer. But you can see the grassland habitat is slowly gone. It has been encroached by the woodland. So in terms of hog deer, woodlands are not the ideal habitat, or not at all good for the deer. So that has a negative impact per se. Look, what are we trying to conserve, and at what scale, that is important. For Manas, grasslands are important because there are so many grassland dependent species that have co-evolved with this grassland habitat, and it is important, and you don't find it anywhere else, like the pygmy hawk or the Bengal florican. There are not much Bengal florican habitats in Assam besides the Manas. So at this point of with this background, conserving the grasslands in Manas are really important. So yes, woodland will not have a very positive impact on it. Also, here the second part of the question, I keep why do I keep forgetting the second part?
Yeah, and by the time you answer first point, it went up, and I lose. I
Okay,
mean,
sure. I think
and it's okay.
right.
So he asked the second part. So how woodland and human intervention in woodland, if any, have impact on deer population distribution? Yeah.
We have most of the human intervention in the grassland area. See, I showed you the map where you can see that the southern boundary, as I mentioned, is okay. So this is the southern boundary. It's totally human habitat, and most of the people go inside the national park in the grassland area because they collect thatch and other vegetables or something like this. So the pressure is mostly on the grasslands rather than the woodland. Woodland is also far, so distance also matters. They don't want the villagers don't want to venture around 10 kilometers inside the forest. They will be loitering around 1 kilometer in the jungle. So, and those are mostly grasslands. So human intervention is a main problem in woodland in this part of the park rather than woodland, and that doesn't have a very significant positive impact on the hog. It does have a negative impact. Yes.
So the next question, we have about 3 minutes remaining, so probably we can take at least 2 more questions. First is, what are some simple and non-labor intensive forms of human intervention that can be used to protect and manage these grasslands?
Non-human intervention would have been the flood. Like flood is necessarily the architect.
Non-labor intensive human intervention.
Non-labor intensive. I wish there were any. To arrest the invasion, people have used herbicides in the agricultural lands or something like that. But being a national park, we are not allowed to use it as it might have an impact on other species. So the only way out was engage people and get rid of this invasive. We also have another on the flip side of it. If you see, mostly the people in the fringe areas are not of they don't have a luxury of so much of resources. They anyways do this daily wages or occupation. In a way, we kind of provided alternative sources of income. But I really wish there was some non-intensive, non-labor intensive method of dealing with it. I really wish.
Right. So we have less than 1 minute remaining. I can put another question, but I don't think it will be completed by then. So we'll download all the questions. Probably Alolika can address them later through email as well. We have all the participant email ID. So I'll wind this up here. And I'd like to thank Alolika for this informative presentation, as well as for all the participants for joining us here. So we'll be conducting the EcoTalk webinar almost regularly, not every day, but at least try to do it once a week. So keep following us on Arendnak social media channels to know more about future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If you have any question, please feel free to email. I would love to answer. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.